Right, episode 2, Dennis Hall. The date is on my other computer, 16th of August. I've got 3 computers going here, and one was supposed to be notes, but I can't even get to read it. But anyway, so on with this. Let's have a look at where we're up to.
We're about to show you is not an exhaustive list because that list would be too long. But we want to introduce you to some of the key drivers in New Zealand of false information and dangerous conspiracy. You'll see how they're linked together, what they want us all to believe, and why.
Pedophiles, satanic ritual abuse, adrenochrome, trafficking on a scale you've never ever imagined, cloning of humans, for God's sake. It's just enormous.
Extreme.
Now, this guy, look, like I said, I'm an old man, right? I've been around. I've done lots of stuff in my life. And I keep on going back to when I was a cab driver back in the day, you know. And the thing about being a taxi driver is you're out there in the public. And I used to literally get up at 5 o'clock at night. I'd go to the Green Parrot for dinner at 5:30 or whatever, and or for breakfast at 5:30. So that'd be steak, eggs, chips, and tomatoes. And then I'd drive taxis all night in the dark. And I spent a lot of time also on the taxi radio. I was the centre of communications for Wellington City at night time. Personally, everybody that wanted a taxi back then at some stage had to go through me, right? I did that job for, I don't know, 5 years, I suppose, and I drove taxis at the same time, if you know what I mean. And so I did it, and I did what they called the dog watch, right? Midnight until 6 in the morning, midnight till 7. And I did it for, I might have been actually, dog watch usually starts at 11 there. But I often did it, the early shifts as well. I know what the fuck happens in the city. I just do. I saw some shit, I can tell you. But what that guy just talked about, satanic abuse and fucking child abuse and all that sort of nonsense, never saw any of it. Nothing remotely like what that man said. He's as mad as a snake. I mean, he just believes a whole lot of shit that people have been telling him because it's dramatic, but it's nonsense. So let's hear what the next one has to say. Because, you know, some of these people are being mixed in with idiots like him. But, you know, it's a bit sad for guys like that, but I know that they kind of believe what they say, but they are talking crap.
Conspiracy theorist Damien Dement is a New Zealand citizen and a super spreader of false claims, racism, and appeals for violence.
He was permanently banned from Twitter at the beginning of 2021 for tweets that he sent around the January 6th insurrection in the United States, which...
Right, now this woman here she is, she's a spokesman for all this, right? Now, so she looks sort of sensible and calm and whatever, so, you know, she's a talking head, basically. Her name's there, Kate Hanna, director of the Disinformation Project. And, of course, it's got a Maori name that nobody understands. But, you know, that's sort of, it's a wonder she hasn't changed the name to a Maori and put one on her chin. But, you know, whatever we like about this, whatever we think about it, she's the talking head. So, you know, she's created to a certain image to go through this and tell us the story, and we're going to listen because she looks like she makes sense.
Noted similar acts taking place here in New Zealand and lauded the rioting, death and destruction that took place at the Capitol.
New Zealand politicians.
Now, I wouldn't have thought that, you know, the sort of group of people, you know, the rioting and destruction and all the rest of it. I mean, most of those people down there weren't rioting. The rioting sort of happened as far as I could see on the last day. I never went there. I don't live far from there. That was the last place I was going to go. But, you know, rioting and destruction and all the rest of it, I mean, that, like it or not, I'll say this now because I might as well, that protest had no leadership. That protest was a very spontaneous thing by people in New Zealand, and they were kind of nominally supported in ways. But notice, one of the things about it, there was a lot of Maoris involved in that. And so when they talk about white supremacism here, they, you know, you've got to ask them how they equate that, thing in Parliament grounds with white supremacism when there were so many Maoris in evidence, you know. What's the deal? You know, these people clearly think the rest of us are fucking idiots. Clearly, because, you know, I mean, you can, as you can see, you can rip this apart without any trouble at all. But anyway, onwards and upwards.
Will fear for their lives, and rightfully
See,
so.
this is this mad guy again.
Have a good one.
But this man is part of an army.
The next on our list, Calvin Elk, first.
Now, here we got one crazy guy. There's lots of guys in New Zealand who've got guns and who used to have guns, go hunting or whatever, and like guns. This lunatic's going to get on and make a video at home in his lounge and show off his funny guns with a bloody black mask on because he thinks he's being cool. And so then he's going to post this on and this is obviously the television set of the people making the program, not his. And so think about it. He's a single person, and there will always be people like this, and they'll be all over the world, everywhere, because, you know, these people just do exist.
To public attention 20 years ago as a disaffected former soldier who claimed he...
And so see what she just said then? This is 20 years ago. I mean, fucking 20 years, this is like the year 2000. I mean, a whole lot of people thought all sorts of shit was going to happen in the year 2000. But what's that got to do with a protest in Parliament today? Nothing.
Own army and was prepared to go into battle with the government.
To preserve what's inherently out.
Prepared to go into battle with the government. There's always people who think they're prepared to go into battle with the government, but, you know, they can't get past first base. We know that, they know that, the police know that, the government knows that, and yet they still run this sort of nonsense. And, you know, this guy here, they've gone through hours of video probably to edit what he said into this thing, and he says some nutty things.
I'll take it right to the end, if that means picking up arms, if it means a confrontation with the oppressors in a heartbeat.
He led...
You know, can't you get it? I mean, this guy's seen too many movies. He watches too much television. I mean, who sits around and says crap like that? You know, the idea that there's a whole body of people in New Zealand talking like that is just bloody silly. But the ones that do will put it on a video. And then, you see, the difference between now and sort of 30 years ago is you couldn't do this shit years ago in this way. So you couldn't make your own home video like I am now. I mean, all I've got is a fucking computer. I've got two of them, and this one here broke down. I bought another one. They fixed that one up, so I've got two. And why? Well, don't get rid of that because it's got a whole lot of my Word files in it. And so I can make a video like this at home. Nobody else here. You know, wife's away. She's not crazy. I'm probably a little crazy, but and so, you know, this phenomena that we're looking at here, that these people at Radio New Zealand and stuff are making such an issue of, is a recent thing. And it's just the way that people now express themselves. Didn't used to express themselves. They used to go and lean on the bar and say, oh, you know, the Prime Minister's an arsehole. Of course they did. What's the difference? The difference is they can video it, for Christ's sake. I mean, look, you know, all I got to do is pick up my bloody cell phone. I mean, how long ago there's an old phone, you know, normal phone. And somewhere here I've got my cell phone, and you know, and the thing about a cell phone is I can make a video on a cell phone and send it to America. I can talk to somebody in China on FaceTime. Couldn't do that 20 years ago. Had to talk about it in the pub. And so what these people are doing is showing their lack of understanding with the fact that modern technology has changed the way that people do things. I mean, really, it's a simple thing, people. Anyway, sorry.
Far-right Direct Democracy Party, which stood in the 2005 general election.
I'd like to welcome the party leader, the man who started it all, the man to tell you all about it. Please welcome Calvin Elks.
So, you notice in that room there's probably about 50 people, that's all. You're not going to win any bloody elections with 50 people. And you know, while I'm at it, when people start these Mickey Mouse small parties, and I know people personally who have done it, they always fail. They always fail. All those Mickey Mouse little parties do is split the vote. What is it about that? I mean, they've sort of figured that out because they're now talking about an umbrella party. But, you know, they're wanting to include some lunatics in that. They just are. And so, I mean, I know about the small right-wing parties because I know people who are doing it. But, you know, I mean, this, seriously, I mean, you'll always get disaffected people like this. Always have, always will. The difference now is that they can televise what they do. Okay. Sorry.
Articulate speech ready for you all. But to be honest,
And here's this crazy bastard again. I mean, he's one guy, but he's got some balloons. Woo.
I think it's a waste of time.
He had a go at acting.
Well, this looks serious. Oh no, I haven't forgotten the birthday.
So they can ridicule him because he had to go at acting. I mean, acting is pretending anyway. Good Lord. I mean, so that makes you got to sort of look at, I don't know, some famous film star and say, what does he do for a living? Oh, he pretends.
Anything?
I am pregnant. Congratulations, Dad.
Oh, and we can connect him with a guy that rides a Harley because, you know, they're all radical. So here we've got Counterspin. You know, I would sort of probably have been the sort of person that might have watched this, but I never have. I never sort of really picked up on this until today. And but you know, what this Counterspin business shows you is that technology it creates two things that never happened. When those people in the past used to talk in the pub about radical politics, and you know, forget about it when they went home and sobered up. These days, they can make a bloody movie out of it, and not only that, they can broadcast it, and it's recorded, and so, and it's on the internet, which will sort of, so they put up a file on internet. They put up a file on the internet. This, okay, bing, put the file up. The file remains there. So what you can do today that you couldn't do before is you can go and pick up the file of what somebody said a month ago, or 6 weeks ago, or a year ago. You couldn't do that before. So all this stuff remains. So in a way, what this is doing is it's giving ordinary people a voice, which is being used. And the reason it's being used is because the government, this green Labour government, has deprived you of the opportunity to have a voice through the normal medium. Because the medium is controlled, and controlled to the level where they now produce fucking rubbish like this. And I can't believe that this is as easy as it is for me to comment on, but, you know, we've got to get through it.
And in 2021, ALP launched Counterspin Media.
We must hold the line. We are in a war. It's an information war.
A far-right online TV channel running at that stage on the platform of former Trump campaign chief Steve Bannon.
Are you prepared to give it up and let these elites take it and just give it away? That's the power.
So we're talking New Zealand politics, but suddenly the centrepiece is Donald Trump and Steve Bannon. They're Americans. They know nothing about New Zealand politics, but they're part of this because these guys need them to be able to make up the gaps in what they're trying to do.
That elected Donald Trump.
Bannon believes
And, you know, we all love to hate Donald Trump.
2020 US election was stolen and calls mainstream media the opposition.
And all the mainstream media.
And, you know, the thing about mainstream media is it is generally speaking to the left. So, you know, look, guess where I get most of my international news? Al Jazeera. Because, you know, it's very clear to me as a person who sort of looks at this stuff and because I don't consider myself to be far right. I am what you might call conservative. I take a conservative view of things, you know. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with being conservative. I mean, the other thing about half of New Zealand is conservative, and that's demonstrated by the fact that National gets voted back in every bloody 3 years or 6 years or whatever. But, you know, the thing about Trump is that, I mean, Trump was a kind of larger-than-life figure, and he won the American election, and then they voted, and then along comes Joe Biden, which is a polar opposite to that, a guy who's dead on his feet, and voted him in instead, because, that was a reaction to Trump. It's kind of a thing. And, we're going to have now, at our next election, we're going to have a reaction to Jacinda, because Jacinda and what she's done and the Mahuta and all the rest of it, they are going to go out like a tidal wave. They're going to absolutely be stunned at the size of the vote that's going to be against them. And all New Zealanders will be too, because, we are not used to that kind of lunacy that we've had over the last few years. But we've seen it, even the very conservative people in the suburbs have seen it. They're shaking their heads. And so a whole lot of those people who nominally will go, and there's a whole lot of people who always vote left because they're fundamentally left. But there's a whole lot of people who just go, I kind of like Jacinda because, look, I like that colour of her lipstick. You think a lot of people are not that shallow? You better believe they are.
Hailed as the great podium of truth, I call it bullshit, is turned out to be completely, utterly false, fake, phony liars.
And so see the difference between the way this thing is presented generally and these people. I mean, this thing is presented generally in a very sophisticated way. This guy is about as unsophisticated as a I don't know, unsophisticated, foolish, but he enjoys what he's doing, and there's people who will support him. You know what I mean? And as I said before, he doesn't have to go to a TV channel and convince them to do it. He can do it in his lounge, just like I am right now. I'm a poor old pensioner, for Christ's sake, but I can make my own TV channel if I want to. Jesus. Come on.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
This is about identity making and meaning making to
You see how it cut away from lunatic to somebody who looks very sane?
a space of leadership, a claim of space of importance.
So if the military command is watching this, and I guarantee you they will be.
Counterspin live stream.
Yeah, you see, So this guy actually thinks that military are watching him. I mean, some of the people watching him will be military, but are they taking him seriously? I mean, really? Would they take him seriously? I don't think so.
Throughout the Wellington occupation, with Elk repeatedly calling for an overthrow of the...
The Wellington occupation. This is about this Parliament buildings thing. I mean, these guys all jumped on the bandwagon. There was a bunch of people down there there's a lot of disaffected people in New Zealand, a lot of disaffected people, and a lot of them went down and started to campaign in Parliament, and then a whole lot of fucking lunatics joined them. Just did. And there's the picture.
Including a military coup.
We'll be happy for it to be in your safe hands.
And so a military coup, I mean, seriously. Why, I don't take that sort of stuff seriously. How come TVNZ are taking it seriously, or whatever, the Radio New Zealand? I mean, really? Who takes Radio New Zealand seriously anymore? And so this is a misleading thing, because that is, by putting that on the side of a building, that's superimposed on there. That's not been projected on the side of a building. What these people making this are doing is making this seem like his voice seemed like a much bigger voice than it actually is. Understand what's happening here. That is a clear definition of propaganda.
Criminals that occupy Parasite Palace, laughingly called Beehive, need to be gone.
Fellow counterspin.
And so even if this idiot had managed to say some sensible things, these people have only picked out the worst of it. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. They know that.
Presenter Hannah Spearer is Calvin Elk's partner. She describes herself as an anti-feminist and a patriot.
To resist, of course, this tyrannical government, which is not going to stop. It's a system, of course, as we all know. Just go.
The button again. Tyrannical government. What constitutes a tyrannical government? And why would these people describe this government as tyrannical? Well, if you stop and ask yourself, when you stop and realise that they've taken our news media and completely changed it to the degree where now recently they just did most of the weather in Maori. Most Maori can't speak Maori or understand it. And so the idea that the weather would be done in Maori is nonsensical. And so this whole Maori language thing that's going on our television and in our news and in our weather and whatever, what that's doing is it's turning a lot of people against the Maori language. It just as people, it's an inconvenience. So, why they would create an inconvenience which actually is running against what they're trying to do. They might be getting a few Maori and a few extremists to go down and learn Maori, but the numbers are changing because I've been checking, because I'm one of those crazy bastards who do. And the thing was that about sort of 2 years ago, when I asked Google how many Maoris could speak Maori, I didn't ask them whether they could speak Maori. What I asked them was how many Maori can conduct a conversation, and how many Maori can conduct an everyday conversation in the Maori language. And the answer was 5,000. Now, 5,000 is a round figure. So, they hooked a number out of the air, but that was the number that was acceptable back then. They're now saying it's 50,000. The idea that suddenly there are 50,000 Maoris who can conduct a conversation in Maori is ludicrous. It's just simply not true. But the ordinary people like me, we can sense what's going on here, and we can sort of see it, and we see that as propaganda and indoctrination. That's how I see all the Maori language stuff on the TV and Maori greetings and whatever as indoctrination, because it's all very well putting Maori greetings on, but they mean nothing to most people. Some people will understand it a bit, but I don't, and I don't care. And but it does irritate me, and so I have a bit to say about that. But the thing is that what they're doing is they're trying to use the fact that people speak English, and using their need for news and weather to force some Maori on them. And a lot of people consider that to be very unfair. They just do. And we, the rest of us who are not Maori, we know that most Maori can't speak Maori. So, to us that's so now they're teaching it in school. And the other thing that we also know is that Maori have to make up what they're doing is here's an example. On the petrol pumps in the mobile service station, they've got a Maori name on the pump for premium petrol. It was only a few years ago we didn't have premium petrol. We only have one size fits all. But now we have premium, and they've got a Maori name for it. Made up. They made it up. Like most of those words, just made up. And we all know that. And so that makes me feel resentful that they would do that and expect me to take it seriously. That's what's going on here. Anyway, back to which is the right mouse, this one. So onwards.
Around the globe, and at this point it's slavery versus freedom.
Hannah Spearer is welcoming to Kyle Chapman, the former leader of the National Front and the neo-Nazi right.
Oh, Jesus. Kyle Chapman. They are so desperate that they've gone and dug Kyle Chapman out. Kyle Chapman was running around being a Nazi 40, 50 years ago, 30 years ago at least. I remember his name. Everybody would say, oh, Kyle Chapman, he's a Nazi, most of today's generation are not even sure what Nazis are. Jesus, I tell you what, I know exactly what Nazis are because I know the history. Believe me, that's what I watch. When you guys are watching Star Wars, I'm watching the history. And so Kyle Chapman, he was in the newspapers back in the day, and we just used to think, oh, the lunatic. Who's gonna take any notice of Nazism? Seriously, who's going to sort of, Nazism, one of their main things was let's kill all the Jews. Who's going to think that's a smart thing to do? What kind of idiot? The thing about the Germans that I got to tell you about Jews and Germans and gypsies and whatever, one of the things that you're not allowed to see anymore, but it's a fact, is the relative IQ between races, right? And guess who comes out on top? Who's got the highest IQ? Might not be exactly a way to to do things. But, you know, in the days when you could find those statistics, can't now, Jews were the people who came out with the highest IQ. So guess who was second? The Chinese, not us. We were third. Europeans were third. So the Jews and the Asians, as in Japanese and Chinese, were before us. And if you go, wow, is that really true? Why is it that they didn't develop the civilization then? Well, you know, it was a bit of luck. It was down to people like Faraday, you know, people that they didn't discover electricity. They didn't invent electricity. They kind of discovered it. But that was the key thing that said the Chinese were being held back by the emperor system, because I've read the history, and we were not, and we found electricity, and we had people like Faraday and I can't remember the guy who, Volta, was it? I don't know. Anyway, onwards and upwards. And so Kyle Chapman, they expect us to take something seriously that's got... Is Kyle Chapman still alive? I don't know. He must be an old bastard now.
Resistance.
Some stupid things. They like to call you a white supremacist.
Resistance. I mean, seriously. A half a dozen nutbars bloody having a meeting in a pub are a resistance? Give me a break.
What have you got to say to those people who like to try and discredit you and everybody else because of that?
The mainstream media is just a joke now. We're very happy to support you guys. We love Counterspin.
Hannah Spearer is also known as Sarah Smith. Under that name in 2020, she was speaking publicly about satanic ritual abuse.
To kind of stand up in front of a group like that and credit Trump for his work on child trafficking and raising awareness about the topic is just phenomenal.
Another on our list, Carleen Heriora, spoke at the same event about child sex trafficking.
And it's bigger than anything I could have ever imagined.
Right. Child sex trafficking, bigger than anything I could ever have imagined. I have had a checkered career, but I've never seen it, any of this child trafficking. But I don't dispute that it actually sort of happens. But I don't think it's a gigantically huge thing that is being styled here. I think that we would be more aware of children disappearing if it were. And there would be, from time to time, and there was that little girl in Britain who was taken away. I can't remember her name. Her name was a household name for a while. And, there's always going to be people like that. They're just horrible, disgusting criminals. But, the idea that it's a sort of a trend that's rampaging across the planet is just fear-mongering, I think. Marilyn McCann, Mandy McCann, but her name was McCann. Oh, you're so sad that something like that would happen to a poor child. But, there she was. I mean, she got taken away and she became globally famous. So why aren't these child trafficking other kids that these people are talking about, how come they're not becoming globally famous? Is because they're not cute? Because their parents are not saying anything about it? Or because it's mostly bullshit?
Myself being involved in...
Heriora describes herself as a wannabe musician who has mostly worked in hospitality. But in 2021, she led the Sovereign Hikoi of Truth, which looks on the face of it like Indigenous activism.
I am no longer going to stand aside and watch my people be slowly destroyed by a government that is a corporation.
I've got to interrupt again. Maori haven't been slowly destroyed. When the Europeans came here, there were 120,000 odd of them. Amongst the things that happened is that Hongi Hika, who's now being styled differently in our history, he was taken or went or whatever on a sailing ship to Britain, and with his tattooed face and all the rest of it, and was feted and lauded over there as a cannibal, as a chief of tribes in New Zealand, right? And so. Apparently he had some sort of discussion with people about a Maori dictionary, right? Now what Hongi Hika did is he was given a lot of gifts And so I've heard this story sort of two ways. But the story the nuns told me back in the day was that he was given a whole lot of gifts in London because he was taken to the famous houses and all that rest of it. And he was a celebrity. Why was he a celebrity? Because he looked so strange with his facial tattoos. People had never seen it before. So, of course, he was a bloody celebrity. So he bought he was given all these gifts. And when he was coming back to New Zealand on the sailing ship, stopped in Sydney, sold all those gifts. And what did he buy? They say that he bought upwards of 1,000 muskets and powder and shot. And so he came back here and slaughtered other tribes. So he slaughtered at least 20,000 of those 120,000 people. So he slaughtered a sixth of the Maori population. But in our history now, when you go back and have a look, it says that he was an educator over in Britain talking about a Maori dictionary. That's how distorted our history has become. Because it's been done in recent times. I watch these bloody websites, or I go and research this stuff. I see them changing. You go there one time, and then if you go next time and it's saying something completely different, you know it's all bullshit. And as soon as somebody like me calls it bullshit,
assortment of
you go,
conspiracy
"Oh, really?"
theories, including anti-Semitism.
Although Evelyn Rothschild looks like a harmless gray-haired old man, make no mistake about it. Rothschild and his ancestors have handpicked presidents, crashed stock markets, bankrupted nations,
and climate change denial.
In fact, growing numbers of experts see the whole issue as a sleight of hand, a climate hustle.
So what they're doing now is they're picking up all the buzzwords, and I've got up to 31. I'm going to stop in a minute, and I'll stop and start again. But so we've just moved into another phase, and that is, let's move away from all the rest of this nonsense because we can't really hold it together, and we'll talk about instead climate change because that is the current big thing.